Imagine three children disappearing without a trace on an ordinary school day in 1990. For 2 decades, there is complete silence. But then, one random day, the grandfather of one of the children discovers something hidden deep inside an old school backpack. Something that could change everything we thought we knew about this disappearance. Autumn in Heidelberg has always had something magical about it. The golden leaves carried by the wind danced through the narrow streets of the old town. The Neckar, which meandered through the city like a silver ribbon, while the sun bathed the facades of the old houses in warm light. The castle ruins, which stood majestically above everything and protected the city like a silent guardian. But on October 3rd, 1990, the day of German reunification, this magic was to be lost forever for the Becker family. It was the day the triplets, Lucas, Emma, and Jonas, disappeared on their way to school as if the earth had swallowed them. The Beckers were a completely normal family. Klaus and Helga, both teachers, had lovingly furnished their modest house on the outskirts of Heidelberg. The triplets, 12 years old, with their chestnut brown hair and lively green eyes, were the pride of their parents. And then there was Grandpa Wilhelm, who had lived with them since his wife died 3 years ago. A spry 70-year-old with a heart of gold and stories that children loved. Grandpa, tell us about that night again. When you first met Grandma, Emma begged every night before going to bed. Again? You know the story by heart, Wilhelm laughed, leaning back in his chair. But she's so beautiful, Emma insisted, and her brothers nodded eagerly. On that morning of October 3rd, everything was as usual. The children had a hasty breakfast while Helga prepared their packed lunches. Klaus had already left for school early. As director, he had to prepare the celebrations for German Unity Day. Don't forget your flutes, Helga reminded the children. Today is the dress rehearsal for the concert. I can't find mine, Jonas moaned as he rummaged through his backpack. It's on the piano where you left it last night, Wilhelm replied, without looking up from his newspaper. He knew his grandchildren's habits better than they did. The triplets were excited. The school had prepared a special program for the historic day. They would be part of a group of children performing in front of the town hall. See you at the town hall, Helga said as she kissed each child on the forehead. Grandpa and I will join you later. Can we go get ice cream afterward? Lucas asked hopefully. If you're good. Wilhelm smiled and winked at them. With a final wave, the three children disappeared through the garden gates, their backpacks on their backs, their laughter mingling with the rustling of autumn leaves beneath their feet. It was the last time Helga and Wilhelm would see her. The primary school on the banks of the Neckar River was only a 10-minute walk from the baker's house, a path that the children have walked alone since first grade. The path led through a quiet residential area past a small park and finally over a pedestrian bridge that crossed the Neckar River. The triplets never arrived at school. It was Mrs. Schmidt, the music teacher, who first raised the alarm. When she checked attendance, she noticed that the Bakers were missing. Unusual, because the three of them were always punctual and reliable. Has anyone seen Lucas, Emma, or Jonas today? She asked the class. Silent, confused glances were exchanged. Perhaps you could help with the preparations for the concert, suggested one student, but a quick inquiry revealed that no one had seen the triplets. Mrs. Schmidt, worried, called the secretary. At 9:30 a.m., the phone rang in the baker's house. Wilhelm, who was sweeping up the leaves in the garden, rushed in to answer the phone. Mr. Becker, this is Mrs. Mueller from the elementary school office. Did the children stay home today? You did not show up for class. Wilhelm's world stood still. A cold feeling of fear crept up his spine. Excuse me? They left over an hour ago, he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. I understand. We'll check if you're perhaps somewhere else at school. I'll call you right back. Wilhelm hung up, his hand shaking. He immediately dialed Klaus's office at the school. The children haven't arrived, he said bluntly when his son-in-law answered. An hour later, all of Heidelberg was in an uproar. Klaus and Helga, pale with fear, stood in front of the police headquarters while officers took their statements. Wilhelm retraced the route to school again and again, calling out the names of his grandchildren, asking every passerby, every shopkeeper, have you seen three children? Triplets, 12 years old with brown hair. No one had seen them. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The police immediately organized a large-scale search, officers combing the park, the riverbank, every corner along the school route. Helicopters circled over the city. Volunteers, teachers, parents, and neighbors joined the search. German Unity Day, which was supposed to be a celebration of joy, turned into a day of fear and uncertainty for Heidelberg. "We have to consider all possibilities," Chief Inspector Weber told the parents as they returned to police headquarters that evening, exhausted and despairing. "Are there relatives they might have gone to? Was there a recent argument at home?" "My children would never run away," Klaus said firmly, even though his eyes were red from crying. "Someone must have taken them." Helga could hardly speak. She held a photo of the triplets in her hands, taken last Christmas, all three laughing in front of the Christmas tree. "They wanted to play in the concert," she whispered again and again. "They have been practicing for weeks." The news of the disappearance of the Baker triplets spread like wildfire. The next day, regional and soon national media reported on it. The fact that they were triplets and that their disappearance coincided with the historic day of German reunification made the case particularly sensational. Theories were put forward, rumors spread. Some speculated about a kidnapping by child traffickers, others about a tragic accident. The children might have fallen into the Neckar, some said, or they might have gotten lost in the forest. The triplets' classmates were questioned, but no one noticed anything unusual. Only Marie, Emma's best friend, remembered something. "Emma spoke to a man after school yesterday," she said hesitantly. "I've never seen him before." This statement triggered a new wave of investigations. A composite sketch was created. A middle-aged man with glasses and a noticeable mole on his chin. The picture was posted all over the city, published in newspapers, and shown on television. But no one came forward. The man remained a phantom, a trail that led to nowhere. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. The intensive search was gradually reduced, although the investigation continued. The baker's house turned into a kind of shrine. The children's rooms remained untouched, as if they could return at any moment. Elga gave up her job as a teacher, unable to go into a classroom every day and teach other children while her own were missing. Klaus lost himself in his work, as if constant activity could numb the pain. And Wilhelm, the old man, aged decades overnight. His shoulders slumped, his face was creased with deep furrows. He spent hours looking at old family photos, touching his grandchildren's toys, reading their favorite stories, as if that would help him maintain a connection with them. "I should have accompanied you to school," he often said to Helga, his voice broken with guilt. "If only I had gone along." "You can't blame yourself, Father," she replied, although she herself was struggling with similar thoughts. No one could have foreseen this, but the words brought little comfort. The children's absence was like a black hole that sucked all the light, all the joy, all the hope out of their lives. The first anniversary of the disappearance was commemorated with a vigil in Heidelberg. Hundreds of people gathered in the market square, holding candles and singing quiet songs. 3 large photos of the triplets stood on an improvised stage, surrounded by flowers and stuffed animals brought by classmates and friends. Chief Inspector Weber, who had never given up on the case, publicly promised, "We will not rest until we have found the truth." But the truth remained hidden. The investigations came to nothing. The clues became sparse and hope faded. And while the world continued to turn, while other children grew up and life in Heidelberg went on as usual, 3 school backpacks remained untouched in a closet, waiting for their owners who never returned. What no one could have imagined was that 20 years later, one of those backpacks would contain a secret prize that would not only reveal the fate of the triplets, but also change the lives of everyone who loved them forever. And it would be William, the old man with the broken heart, who would discover this secret on a very ordinary autumn day, just like the one where his grandchildren disappeared. Before we reveal the end of this story, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. We are close to reaching 2,000 subscribers, and only you can be part of this success. The first few months after the triplets disappeared were a whirlwind of hectic activity. The police set up a special commission stationed at the Heidelberg Police Headquarters. Volunteers from all parts of Baden-Württemberg joined the Suche actions, which moved further and further away from the city. Sniffer dogs searched every inch of the path the children were supposed to take that fateful morning. Helicopters circled over the surrounding forests, but the silence of the Odenwald hills surrounding Heidelberg seemed to swallow every trace, every hope. They must be somewhere, repeated Klaus Becker, his eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. Every morning before sunrise, he set out with a flashlight and photos of his children to explore areas that had already been searched dozens of times. Helga had transformed the living room into an improvised information center. Maps marked with colored pins covered the walls. Folders containing witness statements, newspaper clippings, and possible clues were piled up on the table. The phone, strategically placed in the middle, rarely rang, but she never strayed far from it. "If you call, I want to be there," she explained to those who advised her to rest. "If my children try to contact them, I want to be the one who answers." Old Wilhelm watched everything with a distant gaze, as if a part of his soul had disappeared along with his grandchildren. He spent hours on the porch, carving small wooden figures of three identical children holding hands. He placed them on the windowsill so they could find their way home, he said, if anyone asked. With each month without results, the investigation began to take a different direction. Chief Inspector Weber, under pressure from his superiors and the media attention, began to explore other theories. "We have to consider the possibility that someone close to the family could be involved," he noted during a meeting with his team. "Only in the missing child cases is a family member involved." This new line of investigation divided the town. Some neighbors, previously sympathetic, began to view Klaus and Helga with suspicion. Rumors slithered like poisonous snakes. Through the cobblestone streets of Heidelberg, "They say Klaus owed money to dangerous people. I heard Helga wanted to leave him. What if the children saw something they shouldn't have?" The Becker family, already shaken by the loss, now had to face the cruel judgment of a community that sought answers at any cost. "How can you think such a thing?" sobbed Helga when her sister told her about the rumors. "They're my children, my whole life. I would give my soul to get her back." Klaus reacted with anger. When he heard comments one evening in the local pub, he broke out into an argument that ended with two men in the hospital and himself in custody for 48 hours. "My son is not a monster," Wilhelm defended his son-in-law before Chief Inspector Weber. "He is a devastated father whom you are crucifying without evidence." By the first anniversary of the disappearance, the official investigation had virtually come to a standstill. The case remained open, but the allocated resources decreased week by week. New crimes, new disappearances in other parts of the country demanded attention. It was then that a man came to Heidelberg who would change the course of history. Martin Stern, an investigative journalist from Der Spiegel who specialized in missing persons cases. Tall, slim, with a scar running down his left cheek and a gaze that seemed to see through lies, Stern was not welcomed by the local police. His unorthodox methods and his tendency to expose the incompetence of the authorities denounced him had earned him enemies throughout Germany. "I'm not here to step on anyone's toes," he assured Chief Inspector Weber at their first meeting. "I just want the truth. Just like you, the truth." And Weber replied bitterly, "I've been looking for you for a year without success. What makes them think you'll have better luck?" A fresh perspective and the advantage of not being bound by official procedures. Stern settled into the small corner of town and began his own investigation from scratch. He re-interviewed all the witnesses, checked every report, and retraced the route the children should have taken on that October 3rd. His presence aroused mixed feelings in the Becker family. On the one hand, he represented new hope. On the other, stirring up the entire case meant reviving the pain that had never truly gone away. "Why should we trust them?" Klaus asked during his first visit to the house. "We've seen dozens of journalists come and go, just looking for a sensational story." Stern didn't take offense. Calmly, he pulled a framed photograph from his briefcase. A smiling boy of about 8 years old. "My younger brother, Felix. He disappeared in 1980 on his way home from school in Munich. They never found him." He paused. His eyes reflected a old but still vivid pain. "I'm not just a journalist, Mr. Becker. I'm someone who understands exactly what you're going through." This confession opened the family's doors. Elgar showed him their meticulous archive. Klaus shared his suspicions, and old Wilhelm, who rarely discussed the subject with strangers, told him about the last morning with his grandchildren. Emma asked me to tell her again how I met her grandmother, he recalled, his voice breaking. I promised her I would do it that evening after the concert. Stern jotted down everything, but what fascinated him most was a seemingly insignificant detail that no one had thoroughly investigated. Marie, Emma's best friend, had mentioned seeing the triplets talking to a stranger the day before their disappearance. The police dismissed it, Helger explained. Marie has a great imagination, and when questioned more closely, she couldn't provide any concrete details about the man. Children see things that adults ignore, Stern replied. And sometimes what seems like an unimportant detail appears, the key piece of the puzzle. The journalist found Marie, now a 13-year-old teenager, and gained her trust. Instead of a formal interrogation, he invited her for a walk through the city and stopped at the very fountain where she had last seen the triplets. Tell me exactly what you saw, Marie, without worrying about whether you're believed or not. Only the truth as you remember it. Well, the girl closed her eyes and concentrated. He was an older man, but not as old as Grandpa Wilhelm. He had gray hair here. She pointed to his temples and wore dark glasses. He was showing the triplets something. They looked like photographs or postcards. They laughed. Do you remember anything else? His clothes, a particular accent? Marie frowned. He wore a brown jacket, one of those with lots of pockets. And yes, he spoke strangely, not like us. I thought he was a foreigner. This new statement, more detailed than the one in the police reports, led Stern to a new theory. What if the children hadn't been victims of an impulsive kidnapping, but of something planned? What if someone had observed them and gained their trust? The journalist expanded his investigation. He checked the guest books of hotels and guest houses in the area in the days before the disappearance. He interviewed shopkeepers who might have seen the mysterious man in the brown jacket. He inquired about similar cases in the region and made something up. 3 months earlier, in Mannheim, less than an hour from Heidelberg, an 11-year-old girl had disappeared on her way to school. The case had received much less attention than the triplets, but it bore disturbing similarities. The girl, too, had been seen days earlier talking to a stranger. It could be a coincidence, said Chief Inspector Weber when Stern presented his discovery, or it could be the beginning of a pattern we couldn't discern. The investigation gained new momentum. Other cases of missing children in neighboring federal states were investigated. A composite sketch of the suspect was created based on Mayer's description and other witness statements. Suspicious vehicles seen in the areas of disappearance were traced. For the Becker family, this renewed effort brought a mixture of hope and fear. Every newly discovered detail was like reliving the trauma. But it also meant that they had not been forgotten, that someone was still fighting to find their children. Sometimes I dream that I open the door and they are there as if they had never been gone, Helger Stern confessed during one of their long conversations. Other times I fear that I will never know what happened to them, that I will spend the rest of my life in this terrible uncertainty. The journalist did not offer false hope. He knew only too well how cruel it could be to nurture impossible expectations. I can't promise I'll find her children, he said honestly, but I promise I won't stop searching for the truth, whatever it may be. As the investigation progressed, new theories emerged. The worrying evidence pointed to a child trafficking network operating in Central Europe, exploiting the relative proximity to Eastern European borders. According to this hypothesis, the triplets would have been a particularly valuable prize due to their unique characteristics. This possibility opened another wound in the parents' hearts. The idea that her children could be alive, but in the hands of criminals, was almost more painful than the thought of having lost them forever. I would rather know her dead than suffer. Klaus confessed one night after several glasses of schnapps. He immediately regretted his words as if saying them could make them true. The second anniversary of the disappearance came and went. To the third, media attention gradually decreased. Even Stern, despite his commitment, had to divide his time between this and other cases. Heidelberg tried to continue. The posters with the triplets' photos, once ubiquitous, began to fade and were replaced by announcements of local festivals and tourist events. Life went on relentlessly, but for the Becker family, time stood still on October 3, 1990. Her house remained a sanctuary, frozen in the past. The children's rooms remained untouched. Her toys were waiting to be used. Their beds were made every morning as if they could return at any time. And in the midst of this pain suspended in time, old Wilhelm continued to carve his wooden figures. Three identical children holding hands and looking at a horizon that only he could see. 5 years passed, then 10. The world changed. The internet became part of everyday life. Cell phones became ubiquitous. Germany won a football World Cup. But in the small house on the outskirts of Heidelberg, time seemed to stand still. Klaus's hair turned gray, his shoulders hunched under the weight of a loss that never got easier. Helga, once so lively and full of energy, now moved slowly, as if she were carrying an invisible weight. And Wilhelm, now over 90, sat quietly in his chair, his once skillful hands now shaky, but still busy carving his three small figures. The case of the Baker triplets became a local legend, a story that parents told their children to warn them not to talk to strangers. Every year on October 3rd, a small commemoration was held. But with each year, fewer people came. The world forgot, moved on. Only Martin Stern did not forget. Although he was now working on other cases, he returned regularly to Heidelberg, checking old leads and looking for new connections. It was he who made the connection to a similar case in Switzerland, where a pair of twins had disappeared under similar circumstances. It was he who developed the theory that it could be a collector, someone who was looking for special children, for multiples, as if they were rare butterflies for his collection. But despite all his efforts, the truth remained hidden. The triplets remained missing, their fate a mystery that threatened to tear the Becker family apart. Until that day in October 2010 when Wilhelm, now a frail old man with a heart full of untold stories, found something that would change everything. October 2010 brought an early frost to Heidelberg. The leaves, which normally glowed in warm golden tones, turned brown and brittle overnight. Wilhelm Becker, now 90 years old, felt the cold in his bones when he woke up that morning. His joints ached more than usual, a sure sign of the approaching winter. Years had passed since the day his grandchildren disappeared. 20 years of searching, hope, disappointment, and finally a kind of quiet resignation that had settled like a gray veil over the family home. Klaus died of a heart attack 3 years ago. The doctors called it a result of stress and untreated depression. Helga knew better. "He died of a broken heart," she said at the funeral, her voice as empty as her eyes. Now only Wilhelm and Helga lived in the house that had once been filled with children's laughter. Two ghosts wandering through the rooms, trapped between memory and present. On this special morning, October 15th, 2010, would have been the triplets' 32nd birthday, a day that the family still celebrated in silent devotion. Helga would bake 3 small cakes like every year. Wilhelm would carve 3 new wooden figures, and together they would leaf through the photo albums, telling the stories they had already told 100 times, as if the words could somehow bring the children back. But this year felt different. Wilhelm couldn't put his finger on it, but when he looked in the mirror, he saw more than just an old man with white hair and a wrinkled face. He saw someone who was tired, tired of waiting, tired of uncertainty. "I won't be able to celebrate many more birthdays with you," he whispered to his reflection. "I need to know what happened before I leave." After breakfast, while Helga prepared the cakes in the kitchen, Wilhelm slowly climbed the stairs to the attic. Every step was a challenge for his arthritic knees, but he was determined. Once upstairs, he turned on the light and looked around the dusty room. The attic was like a museum of the past. Here were stored the children's toys, their clothes they never outgrew, their school books and notebooks, all carefully stored in labeled boxes, as if just waiting to be used again. Wilhelm went to a certain corner where there were 3 school bags, a blue one for Lucas, a green one for Jonas, and a red one for Emma. They had been taken from school the day after the disappearance, their contents untouched like a time capsule from 1990. He had searched these bags hundreds of times, just like the police, and later Martin Stern. But today, on this special day, something drew him to Emma's red satchel. With trembling hands, he opened it and poured the contents onto the floor. School books, notebooks with careful childish handwriting, a small egg with colored pencils, a half-eaten packet of gummy bears that had long since gone hard. Wilhelm picked up each piece and examined it as if it might reveal a secret to him. When he opened the math book, a folded sheet of paper fell out. He picked it up and unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing. Three children holding hands in front of a big house with a red roof. Above it, in Emma's clumsy handwriting, was written, "Our new home." Wilhelm's heart beat faster. He had never seen this drawing before. Had the police overlooked them, or had Emma hidden them? He examined the satchel more closely, feeling the lining. In one corner, he felt something hard and angular. Using a small pocket knife, he carefully cut open the lining and pulled out a small object, a notebook no larger than the palm of his hand, with a worn red leather cover. Emma's secret diary. With a pounding heart, Wilhelm opened the book. The first few pages contained typical entries from a 12-year-old girl. Thoughts about school friends, small arguments with brothers, dreams of the future. But then, about halfway through the book, the tone of the entries changed. October 2nd, 1990. Today I saw him again, the man with the glasses. He was waiting for us at the well. He says he knows our real mother. Our real mother? I don't know whether to believe him. Luke says he's lying, but Jonas is curious. The man showed us photos. A woman who looks like us. He says we were stolen as babies, that Mom and Dad aren't our real parents. That can't be right, can it? But why would he lie? Wilhelm to pause. His hands were shaking so much that he could hardly continue reading. Stolen, not her real parents. What did all this mean? He continued to leaf through. October 3rd, 1990. Tomorrow is the big day. We meet the man at the old water tower before we go to school. He brings us to our real mother. Just for one day, he says. We can come back if we want. I'm scared, but also excited. What if it's true? What if we have another family? Lucas still doesn't want to come, but Jonas and I convinced him. We need to know. We decided not to tell anyone, not even Grandpa. He wouldn't understand. We'll come back before someone misses us. The words blurred before Wilhelm's eyes as tears ran down his cheeks. They had left voluntarily, they had planned to come back, but they never returned. With trembling fingers, he turned to the last written page. October 3rd, 1990. Later, I'm only packing the essentials now, as the man said. I take my diary with me, but I hide it in my satchel in case someone searches my bag. I'm so excited I can't sleep. Tomorrow we will meet our real mother. I wonder what she's like, if she missed us. The man says she's been looking for us all these years. I hope Mom and Dad won't be too sad. We'll be back. It's only for one day. Just to see. Just to know. That was the last entry. Wilhelm stared at the blank pages that followed, as if they could reveal to him what had happened afterward. Why the children had never returned. What had become of them. With his diary firmly in his hand, he stood up with difficulty. His knees protested painfully. He had to go to Helga. She had to know. And then they had to call Martin Stern. After all these years, they finally had a real clue. As he descended the stairs, he held on tightly to the railing. His head was buzzing with questions. Who was this man with the glasses? Who was this woman who claimed to be the biological mother of the triplets? And most importantly, were his grandchildren still alive? Helga! He called as he reached the kitchen. Helga, I found something. She turned around, flour on her hands, her eyes red from crying. She always cried when she baked birthday cakes. What's wrong, Father? You look like you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost, he said, holding up the little red book, but the truth, or at least part of it. Together they read the diary page by page, word by word. Helga's face grew paler with each sentence. That can't be true, she whispered when they were finished. Klaus and I were her parents. We gave birth to them. I remember every second of the birth. Wilhelm placed his hand on hers. Are you sure, Helga? Are you really sure? A strange expression crossed her face, a mixture of shock, realization, and guilt. We have to call Martin, she said finally, her voice barely audible. He has to see this. Martin Stern came that same day. He had changed in those 20 years. Gray streaks ran through his once dark hair. Deep lines had become etched into his face. But his eyes were still sharp, his mind clear. He read the diary twice, took notes, asked questions. Then he leaned back and looked at Wilhelm and Helga for a long time. This changes everything, he finally said. All these years we've been looking for a kidnapping, but the children left voluntarily. They were not taken by force, but lured with a story about their true origins. But that's nonsense, protested Helga. I'm her mother. I gave birth to you. Martin looked at her sympathetically. Are you absolutely sure about that, Ms. Becker? Could you show me the children's birth certificates? Helga froze. The birth certificates? Yes, the official documents confirming that they gave birth to the triplets. A long silence followed. Wilhelm watched as various emotions flitted across Helga's face. Fear, guilt, resignation. Klaus took care of it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The paperwork, the formalities. Klaus took care of all that. Martin nodded as if he had been expecting exactly that answer. And when exactly were the triplets born, Mrs. Becker? At which hospital? October 15th, 1978, at Heidelberg University Hospital, she answered automatically. Interesting, said Martin, because I checked the hospital's birth records for that period as part of my original research. There's no entry about the birth of triplets on that day, or in that month, or in that year. The color completely drained from Helga's face. She sank into a chair, her hands shaking. It was Klaus's idea, she whispered. We couldn't have children. We tried for years. Then Klaus's cousin told him about a woman who had triplets and couldn't keep them. He said the paperwork would be taken care of later. The most important thing was to give the children a home. Her voice broke. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know they were stolen. Klaus told me that the mother had agreed that she was too sick and too poor to care for 3 children. Wilhelm felt his stomach tighten. For 20 years they had lived in a lie. For 20 years they had mourned children who had perhaps never truly been theirs. We have to find her, he said with a determination he hadn't felt in years. If they went voluntarily, if they wanted to meet their biological mother, there might be records. We could track them down. And what if they don't want to be found? Helga asked. Tears streamed down her face. If they hate us for what we've done, we won't know until we find them, Wilhelm replied. But they deserve to know that we never stopped looking for them, that we never stopped loving them, no matter how they came into our lives. Martin nodded decisively. I'll start right away. The man with the glasses, the woman who claims to be their mother. Now we finally have something concrete to look for. After Martin left, Wilhelm and Helga sat in silence at the kitchen table for a long time. The 3 birthday cakes stood untouched before them, a painful reminder of everything they had lost. I'm sorry, Helga said finally. I'm so sorry for lying to you all these years. Wilhelm took her hand in his. His anger, his disappointment were real, but they paled next to the hope that now sprouted in his heart. What's done is done, he said gently. Now we must look forward. Now we must find them. And for the first time in 20 years, he saw in Helga's eyes something he had thought lost, a spark of hope. The discovery of Emmer's diary set in motion a chain reaction no one could have foreseen. Martin Stern, armed with renewed energy and concrete clues, began a feverish search for the mysterious woman who claimed to be the triplets' biological mother. The first breakthrough came faster than expected. In the archives of the Mannheim University Hospital, Martin found an entry about the birth of triplets on October 15, 1978. 2 boys and a girl, born to a woman named Elise Wagner. According to the records, the children had died of sudden infant death syndrome 3 days after birth. But that doesn't make sense, Martin told Wilhelm and Helga when he shared his discovery with them. If they were officially registered as dead, how could they have come to be? The answer lay in a name that appeared in the medical records. Dr. Friedrich Berger, who attending physician at the birth. A quick search revealed that Berger had been a second cousin of Klaus Bucker. He forged the death certificates, Helga whispered when the truth hit her. He told a distraught mother her children had died, while in reality he had given them to us. The realization was devastating. Not only were the triplets not her biological children, they had actually been stolen, taken from a mother who may never have learned the truth. We have to find this Elise Wagner, Wilhelm said resolutely. If she's still alive, if she's the woman who looked for the children 20 years ago, then she might know where they are now. The search for Elise Wagner led Martin across half of Germany. The trail was cold, blurred by time and the poor digital records of the late 1970s. But finally, in a small village in the Black Forest, he found a lead. And Elise Wagner lived here until 1990. The elderly villager, who still remembered the quiet woman, told him, remembered, a sad soul. She never spoke about her past, but every October she lit 3 candles and cried all night. Do you know where she went? Asked Martin. The woman shook her head. She suddenly disappeared. A man came to pick her up, tall, with glasses. They packed some suitcases into his car and drove away. I never saw her again. A man with glasses. The same man who had spoken to the triplets. The timeline fit perfectly. Elise Wagner had left the village in September 1990, just weeks before the triplets disappeared. But then the trail was lost again. No records of an Elise Wagner appearing anywhere in Germany after 1990. No tax returns, no registration certificates, nothing. It was Wilhelm who found the crucial clue. As he read Emma's diary for the 100th time, he noticed something he had previously overlooked. In a corner of the last page, Emma had written something in tiny handwriting. Sunflower House. Sunflower House, Martin repeated thoughtfully. This could mean everything or nothing. But for Helga, it was like a flash of insight. Wait, Klaus had a colleague who left school in the 1980s to found a kind of alternative community. Somewhere in Bavaria, I think. He called it the House of Sunflowers. A quick search confirmed Helga's memory. The House of Sunflowers was a small, self-sufficient community in the Bavarian Alps, founded by a former teacher named Jürgen Hoffmann. The community still existed, secluded and largely self-sufficient. That must be it, said Wilhelm. His voice trembled with excitement. This is the place where the man brought the children. The journey to the Bavarian Alps was arduous for old Wilhelm. His health had deteriorated rapidly in recent months, but nothing could stop him from taking this final journey. Helga, though marked by guilt and fear, insisted on accompanying him. I must look into their eyes, she said. I must tell them that I didn't know, that I have always loved them as my own. The House of Sunflowers lay in a remote valley, surrounded by forests and meadows. A dozen simple wooden houses were grouped around a larger communal building. Sunflowers grew everywhere. Their golden heads turned toward the sun. When Wilhelm, Helga, and Martin reached the valley, they were met by an elderly man who introduced himself as Jürgen Hoffmann. His face was weather-beaten, his eyes alert but not unfriendly. We don't often get visitors here, he said. What brings them to us? Martin explained their request, showed photos of the triplets, and told of their 20-year search. Jürgen listened attentively, his face betraying nothing. Come with me. He finally said, there is someone they should meet. He led her to one of the houses on the edge of the community. It was larger than the others, with a wide veranda and a lush garden full of sunflowers. On the porch, an elderly woman sat in a rocking chair, her silver hair tied in a loose bun. When she saw the visitors, she froze. Elise, said Jürgen gently, these people have come a long way to meet you. Wilhelm felt his heart racing. This woman, this Elise Wagner, was the biological mother of the triplets, the woman from whom they had been taken, the woman they had been searching for 20 years. Are they the grandparents? Asked Elise, her voice barely above a whisper. I am her grandfather, Wilhelm replied, his own voice shaky with emotion. And this is Helga, the woman who raised them. Elise stood up slowly, her movements cautious, as if she feared this moment might burst like a dream. They found her, she said. After all these years, they found her. No, said Wilhelm gently. We found them, but we are still looking for them, for Lucas, Emma, and Jonas. A strange expression crossed Elise's face. Lucas, Emma, and Jonas, she repeated. That's what they called her. What did you call her? Asked Helga. Thomas, Sophie, and Michael, Elise answered. The names I gave them before they were taken away from me. The tension between the two women was palpable. The biological mother and the woman who had raised her children, bound by an impossible situation that neither of them had created. Please, said Wilhelm, we need to know what happened. Where are you now? Elise pointed to 2 chairs on the porch. Sit down, it's a long story. Once everyone was seated, Elise began to tell how she became pregnant as a young single nurse, how the father, a married doctor, refused any responsibility, and how, despite all adversity, she was determined to keep her children. Then came the birth, she said. Her eyes darkened at the memory. There were complications. I lost a lot of blood and was unconscious for days. When I woke up, Dr. Berger told me, "My babies died." I didn't believe him. I felt that they were alive, but nobody listened to me. They called it warning images, a postpartum psychosis. She recounted how she spent years searching for evidence and finally met Jürgen, a former teacher with connections to Klaus Becker's school, who helped her uncover the truth. "We found them in 1990, she said. "We found my children alive and well with a family in Heidelberg." "And you just took her with you?" asked Helga. Her voice trembled with suppressed anger and pain. Elise shook her head. "No." Jürgen spoke to them first and explained the situation. It was their decision to meet me. They only wanted to come for one day, to see, to understand. "But then, that was it," Wilhelm insisted. "Then they learned the whole truth," said Jürgen, who had been listening in silence until then. "I had collected evidence, documents that showed how Dr. Berger had conspired with Klaus Becker to steal the children. When the children saw this, they were shocked and confused. They felt betrayed. They decided to stay with me," Ellis continued. "Just for a while," they said, "until they could sort out their thoughts. But the days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. They loved life here, the community, the nature, and they loved me." "Why didn't you tell us?" asked Wilhelm. Tears streamed down his face. "Why did you leave us in this nightmare of uncertainty?" "The children were scared," Elise replied. "Fear that they would be forced to return. Fear of the legal consequences for me and Jürgen. And later, it became more and more difficult to take the first step. Time passed and the gap grew wider and wider. A silence fell over the veranda, broken only by the gentle rustling of the sunflowers in the wind. "Where are you now?" Wilhelm finally asked, his voice barely audible. Elise smiled, a sad but loving smile. "Sophie, her Emma, lives in Munich. She is a doctor and has 2 children. Michael, her Jonas, is in Berlin, working as an architect, and Thomas, her Lucas, stayed here. He now leads our school." Wilhelm's heart leaped. Are you happy?" "Yes," said Elise gently. "They are happy. They have a good life. But they never forgot her. They often talk about their childhood in Heidelberg, about their grandfather who told them stories and carved wooden figures." Helga, who had been sitting with her head bowed, looked up. "Can we see them?" "Please." Elise hesitated, exchanging a glance with Jürgen. "Thomas is here," she finally said. "I can call him. For the others, that must be his decision." She stood up and went into the house. The minutes stretched like hours as Wilhelm, Helga, and Martin waited, each lost in their own thoughts and feelings. Then the door opened and a man stepped out, tall with chestnut brown hair that was already turning gray at the temples, and the same lively green eyes that Wilhelm knew so well. Luke. No, Thomas, a man now, not the 12-year-old boy who disappeared 20 years ago. He stopped when he saw the visitors, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "Grandpa," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is it really you?" Wilhelm couldn't answer. His throat felt tight, his eyes blurred with tears. He stood up, his old bones protesting, and opened his arms. Thomas hesitated only a moment before closing the distance between them and hugging his grandfather. It was an embrace that bridged 20 years of separation, pain, and loss. "I'm so sorry," Thomas whispered. "I'm so sorry we hurt you so much." "You have come back," said Wilhelm. His voice broke. "Nothing else matters." When they finally separated, Thomas turned to Helga, who was crying silently. "Mom," he said hesitantly, unsure how to address her. "You don't have to call me that," she said quickly. "I understand if you—" "No," he interrupted gently. "You will always be my mom, both of you." He looked at Elise, who was standing in the doorway. "You are both my mothers in different ways." In the hours that followed, as the sun slowly sank behind the mountains and the sunflowers bowed their heads, stories were exchanged, tears were shed, and careful bridges were built. Thomas called his siblings, who promised to come as soon as possible. It wouldn't be easy. There were too many wounds, too many years of separation, too many complicated feelings. But as Wilhelm fell asleep that night in one of the guest rooms of the Sunflower House, he felt a deep, genuine peace for the first time in 20 years. His grandchildren were alive, they were healthy, they were happy, and they were ready to come home. Not to the house in Heidelberg, but to the people who loved them, no matter how complicated that love was. The circle that had been broken 20 years ago was slowly beginning to close again. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and activate notifications so you don't miss our upcoming stories. See you soon. M.